Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. In today's show, I am delighted to be joined by Clive Edwards. Clive is an outstanding rock drummer, best known as former member of UFO, Wild Horses, alongside Brian Robertson and Jimmy Bain, and many other rock acts. His drumming can be found on many recordings with acts such as Phil Lynott, Travers, Cale, Lionheart, Toyah, and many, many others. Hello and welcome to the show, Clive.
Hi there. Nice to be on it. Thank you for asking.
Great to have you on. Thanks very much for coming on. So, since lockdown, obviously, things have got going again for you, have they?
Yes, yeah. Lockdown was, the abrupt stop, everything, bang. I was really busy doing a lot in Europe. I was going out there on a regular basis and all over, and then all of a sudden, nothing. So that was quite a shock.
Yes.
But things have started to pick up. Europe's not opened up like it was as yet, but there's green shoots. I've got some gigs abroad this year, next year rather. This year, 2022, didn't do anything outside of the country really, just in UK.
No, I know it's been tough for a lot of musicians and particularly people in the arts where they haven't really been able to do anything. There's been an abundance of books that have come out, I've noticed.
Yes, well, we had to do something when it was a lockdown. Yeah. I was lucky I had a drum room, so I could go in there and practice and kind of do stuff that I don't actually have time to do when I'm normally working, because I'm normally in my drum room prepping for the next show and or writing stuff for the next recording or working on stuff. But I could actually just go in there with a blank sheet and go, what do I want to work on?
Oh, that's good. So you can actually hone your skills without having the pressure of sort of working to get a particular project out of the way.
That's right, yeah. So I could say, right, I really want to work on my left hand. So I would come up with practice and stuff where I'd play left-handed with a right-handed kit and I'd do different things. It was just something which I could never really do. And because I didn't have time to do that, I'd be learning a song and I'd be learning a set and stuff like this. And you kind of forget about how it was in the old days when you first started, where you were just practicing to hone your skills and you could work on anything you wanted.
I know what you mean. I used to play the guitar and it was all about getting those 10,000 hours in.
Yeah. I mean, you have to put the work in. Yes. End of, you put the work in. I mean, practice doesn't make perfect, no. But it makes permanent. So make sure you practice the right things. Don't practice bad stuff because you'll be locked in.
So you were practicing every day, were you?
I would say most days, not every day, because you've got family stuff and whatever. But I would make sure that I did do a few videos in my drum room during the lockdown with Lionheart.
Oh yeah,
green screen, and would go in there. In fact, I did it. I did the video for Mary with Lionheart, and I had COVID. And I'd been feeling absolutely dreadful. And I was still feeling pretty dreadful when I did the green screen to do the video, which was sort of edited with all of us doing our stuff at home. So, that was fairly early on in 2020.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're busy, and it's good that there's some stuff coming up for next year. So before we talk about your musical career, Clive, can you just tell us a bit about your journey and how you came into the music industry, please?
Yeah, I mean, music played a big part of me growing up. It's quite weird. It was almost like, that was the thing that drew me. I mean, I loved comedy, I loved films, but music, when I was very, very young, different world to now. Things weren't readily available. You had what you could get, and there wasn't a lot of music on radio that really spoke to me. And I'm talking when I'm 4 or 5. Yeah. I'd listen, to the radio in like the car with my parents, and it would be absolutely mind numbing. And then all of a sudden something would come on and it kind of spoke to you. And you got excited. And I must admit, the BBC were quite good on TV when I was very young. They'd put a bit of jazz on, they'd put some blues on, and it would just be that break from Matt Monro and the, Mike Sam singers, because I'm very old, so I go back to the black and white 50s.
Yeah, and it was the light programme, wasn't it, they used to have before 1 and 2, Radio 1 and 2, and it was a whole mixture of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it was very, very scarce. Good music. A lot of it was just, it just didn't really speak to me. I'd switch off. Then all of a sudden a track would come on and you'd go, ooh, quite like that, And then, later on the Beatles arrived and that was it, game over. And then you got Radio 1 and you had all the pirate stations and stuff, and you could hear a lot of stuff. And of course, by then you got pocket money, so you can buy records.
Yeah. And this was before you actually got into drumming. Did you sort of?
No, I started. The very first time I bumped into a drum was at school.
Yeah.
When I must have been, I was in junior school or infant school. I would have been about 5, and they were. The music teacher was doing something where there was recorders flying about, and there was a lot of singing and everything else. And they had a drum, and they wanted this drum beat to be played, even though all these other bits were counter, so it would throw people. So eventually, he gave it to me.
Yeah.
And I started banging it and was playing this drum part, which I found really easy.
And that was just one sort of single drum.
One drum, yeah. And I was just playing this beat. And they did everything they could to make me drop the beat, and lose it. In the end, he went off and got a load of teachers in and said, "Look at this! Look, what? Go on, try do it!" And everyone's doing everything they can to put me off, musically and visually. But no, it was like, this is easy peasy. Next. So from that got me interested, and then a little while later, I sort of. Got some drumsticks at home, and I would but nothing really serious. But then it got more serious when the Beatles arrived, and there'd be myself and my cousin. I remember Rhino miming to the Beatles at Christmas for the family Christmas gathering. I'm not sure which. I think I was Ringo and he was Paul. Being a bass player.
Yeah.
And
did you say Rhino then? So the chap who's in Status Quo.
That's right.
Oh, right, okay.
We kind of grew up together.
Okay.
Because we lived quite close, and we were cousins, So we would spend a lot of time, And then when we started playing, of course, we kind of, did lots together playing. I know we cracked his parents' ceiling when we were rehearsing in his bedroom. They weren't very impressed, so they made us rehearse downstairs in like the lounge, so we couldn't crack any more ceilings.
That was the sheer noise, was it, and the sort of drum?
Yeah, the way
coming through,
and also jumping about, because my cousin can't stand still for just a millisecond, and then he's about. But yeah. So, and how I got into drums, I mean, the big change was I really wanted to be a guitarist, because I could see the Beatles when they're playing away and all the girls are going crazy and you're going, oh, that looks good. So I wanted to play guitar. My parents got me a guitar for Christmas, and I didn't get very far. I had it for about a fortnight, and I would spend most of the time just posing in front of the mirror, pretending to play Please Please Me, And then a friend of my dad's came round, and the guitar was on the chair, and he didn't look, and he was a great big fella, and he just sat on it and broke it.
Oh.
And I was absolutely, oh my God. And my dad said, don't say anything. He will replace it, and he will replace it with something better. Yeah. I'm sure of it. So, I'm thinking, great, I'm going to get a Strat. I'm going to get an electric guitar, a proper one. Well, he turned up a couple of weeks later with a banjo.
Ah.
And I was absolutely gutted. I'm looking at this thing, who the hell in the Beatles plays the banjo or the Rolling Stones? Nobody. Akabilk, he has one, and that's the music I hate, So I sat and cried and looked at it, and oh my God. Then all of a sudden, I looked at it from an angle and went, bloody hell, it's a drum with strings and a neck. So I shot straight up to the shed and cut the neck off. Took off the strings, and took the nut out the back. And my parents had this big old ashtray that was like on a stem, and you could press the top and it would spin. Anyway, I unscrewed it, and as luck would have it, it fitted the thread in the back of the banjo. So I had a banjo on a pedestal, a banjo, bass, which was a drum, and. My dad's friend saw what had happened to the banjo, realised he'd made a mistake, so he bought me a cymbal.
Wow.
So, and it just progressed from there. And
so it was all down. Sorry to interrupt. It was all down to your dad's friend sitting on
the
your
guitar.
that sort of almost made you become a drummer.
It was written. I had to go. And another really good bit of luck was that there was a really good session drummer who played in a lot of the bands. In fact, he played in Lord Rockingham 11, who had the hit with Hoots Mon. Yeah. And he used to be they were the house band on 6-5 Special on TV. And he lived about a mile away, and he used to come into my dad's shop, which was a greengrocer's.
Yeah.
And I knew him, Reg Weller, and lovely, lovely fella. So it was like, well, Clive's got this cut down banjo on a thing, and could you give him some drum lessons? So that was it. So I'd go round to Reg's on Saturday, walk round there, and have a drum lesson.
And what sort of age were you, Clive, at the time?
I would have been about 9 or 10.
Great age to start something like that, because you can be so focused, can't you?
It's perfect. Because the younger you start, it's muscle memory. It's like golf or anything. If you start when you're a young kid or a footballer, you've kind of got that thing instilled already.
Yeah.
So, you've done the practice, you get coached, and so it's a natural step to then go on to be in bands.
Yeah, and of course, you haven't got any sort of distractions as such, have you? You've got you haven't got the responsibilities that you have as an adult, I guess.
No, absolutely. You can just, you get home from school and you can get on like the kit and practice, and that's it. Yeah.
So this would have been in the sort of 1960s, 1970s, Clive?
It would have been the 60s. It would have been between sort of 62 and 65, 66, around there. Wow. So Beatles time.
Yeah, absolute golden time for sort of the beginning of sort of some famous bands coming up and rock and roll, and past the original rock and roll, but pop music as it was.
Yeah. Well, it was good actually, because by the time the music that really, really did sort of speak to me, which was the rock era, I was already able to play. So, I wasn't, fully formed, but I'd been practicing all through those years, of Beatles, Rolling Stones, early Who and stuff like that, getting really excited. And then when it got to 68, 69, and you've got Led Zeppelin, you've got Jimi Hendrix, you've got all these great bands, Free, I was kind of ready to go, not in terms of being in a big band, but certainly I was then able to, form a band with my mates, and then that's it. My cousin was always there for me and him to form a band and do stuff. So
yeah. Oh, it sounds fantastic. Sounds like you had a great time growing up doing that.
We did. Yeah, we did. Yeah. And it kept us out of trouble to a certain extent as well. Because if you haven't got something like that, you can, and you're a bit leery, then...
Yeah. And whereabouts were you? You're in London, were you, Clive?
Hounslow.
Oh, in Hounslow, West London.
Yeah.
Oh, well, so lots of opportunities, I guess, when you're a bit older, maybe to start going to gigs?
Oh, absolutely. I saw Zeppelin play a pub at the Railway Tavern in Hampstead. Yeah. I saw Free, Mott the Hoople, Genesis, so many bands. Biggest not far away was there was Eel Pie Island. There was Isleworth Polytechnic would have lots of great bands on, and it was a big hall. So you'd see the Wishbone Ash, you'd see Genesis with Gabriel and Phil Collins. And then there was Farks Club in Southall, where I saw so many bands. I saw Genesis in the early days before Phil arrived, and I was a bit shocked when I went to see them at Isleworth Poly and Phil Collins had turned up, because it suddenly the band went from like, yeah, they're all right, bit boring here and there, to what is that? you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So the opportunities being in that part of London was fantastic. If you're unlucky enough, or a bit of both, lucky or unlucky, to be in a little tiny quiet place in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah,
it's a great environment to live. But if you want to be in rock and roll,
yeah,
you got to move.
yeah. And I guess also you had all the the Denmark streets for the equipment and the recording studios and stuff just down the
Yeah,
road in West
yeah,
London as well.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
fantastic.
mean, I was lucky enough to get a drum kit fairly early on.
Yeah,
Through Reg, this drummer, he got a drum kit off Andy White, who had played on like the Beatles and stuff like that, on and many bands. So he said, because my dad said, "Oh, I think I should get him a drum kit." He said, "Don't do anything. I'll get him a drum kit because it'll be a good one."
yeah, yeah. So
And
he could see your talent from an early age, obviously.
I assume so. He put
Yeah,
up with me. I mean, the thing is, my practice for years was I didn't touch a drum kit. All I did was a snare drum with a rubber pad. And I would go there and I'd work on rudiments. Never played a bass drum and a hi hat in those years. At home, I would go ballistic because I've got a drum kit for cymbals and I could go mental. But but for my lessons, it was just working on the paradiddles, the ratamacus, the flams, the triplets, and all of the other building blocks that you need to
yes.
be able to play.
And keeping that timing, which you sort of mentioned earlier on, when you were at the school and they tried to distract you, you actually had that sort of natural timing that you were able to
Well,
hone and build up.
yeah, I mean, I must admit, it did always feel really natural and easy to me. It was kind of, I'd found a little niche. I'd found my sweet spot,
Yeah,
you know, in music. The guitar definitely wasn't the sweet spot. That was going to take a lot of work and stuff. So yeah.
as you were growing up, getting into your teens, getting more and more into the drumming and bands and stuff like that. At what point did you I mean, did you ever, when you were at school, were you academic? Did you do anything where you thought, well, I'm going to do this as a career? Or when did it when did music become a career?
It came. Obviously, I left school, and it's a long story, but I got picked up to be a research and development engineer. I was good at physics and science. I couldn't spell because I'm dyslexic, so my spelling was shit. But I could read,
Yeah.
and I read a lot of things, and so science, things like that was good. So I did get this job, which sent me to college. I did stuff at Brunel and Isleworth Poly.
Yes.
But by that time, I was starting to play in bands, and I was struggling in my sort of second year of doing that, of sort of like being away for the weekend gigging. Because what seemed to happen was every time I did a gig or played with somebody, I would be offered another gig. Somebody would
Yes.
come up and go, "God, I really like your playing. What are you doing? Could you?" So that it was like this sort of staircase of getting bigger bands. I would go and do a gig, and somebody would come up and go, "Oh, a friend of mine's looking for a drummer, and he wants to go in and record and stuff like this." So
Yeah.
yeah,
So you were sort of networking and building. That the network was naturally coming to you as you were playing.
absolutely, yeah. Which I think it does with musicians. If the moment you're out there, especially if you play some key venues, it's not so much. I mean, it can happen anywhere, but
Yeah.
if you get a gig and you're playing at the Marquee, or you're doing a gig at somewhere like that, people will be there from other bands, and they
Yes.
will go, "Yeah, we'd like him in our band." So you know that's the it kind of. I didn't have to go out and seek it that much. It was knocking on my door a lot from when I was doing gigs, and I started gigging really early. I mean, when I was about 11, a friend at school, his dad had a band, which was pretty dire, saxophone and everything else, playing all sorts of sort of, stuff that I didn't really like or could play. But he would get me in and I'd be doing gigs. My dad would drive me there and I'd do the gig and I'd get paid. And I
Yeah.
was 11 or 12. And then I did a TV show when I was at school, which they played at the assembly that was fantastic. It was like a school band and the Pink Floyd for a schools they used to do schools shows,
Yes.
which were specifically for schools. It's
Yeah.
probably completely deleted, but then this temporary teacher at our school come up to me and said, "You play the drums, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Right." He said, "The BBC are looking for a school band so they can do from here to there kind of thing, where it starts and where it can go." And they had the Pink Floyd in the studio doing "Saucer Full of Secrets" and all, that kind of stuff. And we want this school band. So he got this guy, Mike Tysell, who could sing. He was incredibly leery. He actually became an actor afterwards rather than a musician. But he could play. He had a bass guitar, and we said, "Well, we haven't got a bass player." And Dave said, "Oh, don't worry. My mate, I'll teach him." So he got this bass guitar that he'd taken surfing in Cornwall. So it was a bit of a wreck. But anyway, we got picked. The BBC went round all these schools looking at these little school bands. We played in like a classroom, and they went, "Yeah, we'll have them." So the next thing, film crew arrives, and we are filmed playing a song which we'd made up called "It's a Mean Old Scene"
Yeah.
in a classroom, and it was on school's TV. So
that's amazing.
It was like incredible.
Yeah. And can you still see? Or did you say it might have been deleted now? Or is
It probably has been. I haven't actually searched.
No.
But it was called, I think it was called Let's Make Pop for schools. And maybe it's there, maybe it's not. I'll actually do a search a bit later and see if I can give them some money to delete it.
So then you left. Well, you went to college to learn the engineering side of things.
Yeah.
And you were doing more and more playing. At what sort of point did you decide, no, I can't do that anymore? I've just got to do the drumming and concentrate on that, and that's my career?
Probably when I was about 17, 18. Because the problem was I was actually misbehaving, and we'd go off on a Friday and I'd be asked to do gigs, driving up to Bradford, getting, a bit pissed and misbehaving. Coming back, Monday I'd be an absolute bloody wreck going in. I couldn't concentrate and everything else. So it was obvious that I didn't have the focus to make it work, because it was quite a responsible kind of job or learning and you have to take it, this is what I really want to do. Well, I wanted to be in a band. So I had to drop out of that. It was like, right, you idiot. Now, what are you going to do now? You're going to have to find bands that pay money. And that's always been an issue in music, especially when you start trying to make any money out of it, or when you've been around for a long time even, But I was lucky.
And you've done that from, sort of 17, 18 up until now. You're still, music is the main thing, and you haven't really done any other work at all.
I have done little bits and pieces. I did some consultancy work in IT security. Back in the old days when, hacking and everything was really, this is sort of like in the days of floppy disks. And then, but I managed, I've serendipity. I met this guy, and he's one of the great, IT security, and he was looking for somebody to help him. And he said, "I can't find anybody. Can I just train you to do a few things?" So he did. So we did some stuff, and we were doing penetration testing and stuff like this. And this is before it became really sexy to be, now IT security is the number one thing. This was when it was like an afterthought and everybody was getting hacked to bits, So I did a bit of that, because I found it really interesting. And the guy that I was working with was brilliant. He was a bit of a mad professor, and he would just intrigue me, and he would tell me all these things and show me all this stuff, And also, at that time, I had some young children, and I didn't want to be away as much, because, you don't earn money sitting at home with music. You've got to go away. So you're away a long time. And, I've got kids, and it's like at some point you've got to go, well, actually, I want to do less playing, still earn a living, but be dad, be taken for granted, not this bloke who comes home after three
No,
months,
no, no.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you could
Life,
always get. I suppose you thought to yourself, well, I can always get back into it a bit more when they've grown up a little bit.
I did, but you always have a little doubt. Can I? Will
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And I must admit, it takes a lot. If you drop back and not do much, I mean, I was always making sure that I'd be doing gigs, every month, but
yes.
not working and solely focused on doing stuff. I must admit, I was quite, surprised how long it takes to get back into proper shape, to be
Oh,
ring
really?
ready.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, if you drop back for a couple of years, it will take a couple of years to get back to where you were, you know, and then you work hard to go a little bit further because you should always try and push yourself.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's that thing, that you think in your mind, yeah, because I'd do a gig now and again, and I'd go, yeah, I'm playing really, really well, and I was playing well. But it's only when you actually get back into full steam mode,
yeah,
and that you suddenly go, God, there's a lot of rust on this bit here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You weren't in the flow. You have to wait a while to get back into the flow, I guess.
Yeah, I could play, but it's like things that would be, a lot easier were harder. I had to think about it a bit more, and there were certain things I won't do that, that kind of feel, because that's a bit tricky. It took a while to actually, get all of the bits working, coordinated.
Going back to your drumming itself,
Hmm.
you mentioned that you sort of got into the harder rock as the '60s progressed. But what were your main influences and style?
Well, I've always had a fairly open mind in style. I mean, I love good players, and it doesn't matter whether it's rock or not. Although, hearing John Bonham, you suddenly went, God, that really is what I'd love to do. That kind of style, or a Phil Collins, or a Mitch Mitchell. Those players, Ginger Baker. They were
Yeah.
kind of, that kind of drumming is sexy.
And they're still so well respected, aren't they?
They are. But
Yeah.
I got into drummers, because I was a real, I was not only in fact, probably before, that rock kind of side took over, I was into jazz a fair bit, and I would
Yes.
listen to, the Miles Davises and Oscar Peterson and people like that. And you had Joe Morello, you had all these, Tony Williams, all these fantastic drummers. So I've never been totally blinkered. That's all I listen to, and I think
Yeah.
that's a good thing to have.
That's got to be healthy, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you get influences, and there's things that they do, and you think, well, actually, I could bring this into a rock environment, because, to be honest, playing is all about nicking or
Yeah.
borrowing, you know,
Yeah.
and making it your own, finding your own slant on it, and the bigger pool of inspiration you have means that you've got more of a diverse style, that you can do stuff and it will sound different to what, everybody's doing the same kind of drum fills.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can pull something else out and they go, oh, never heard that one before. And you go, well, I have, because I've nicked it.
Yeah. So it was a wide variety then in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any music with good players, I can listen to and enjoy, and absorb.
Yeah. And if we've got any listeners that are drummers or they're particularly interested in drums, what is your current setup, Clive? Because I remember when I saw you with Wild Horses, I think you had a double bass kit.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
that still the case?
I have a couple of double bass drum kits. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't use them that often, because in those days you didn't have double pedals. You had to have two bass drums and kick them. Whereas the double pedal has evolved, so obviously it makes life easier. But I still prefer having two bass drums. But my main rig when I go out, because a lot of what I'm doing now isn't, I mean, there's bits of double bass drum work in there, but it's not quite so often as like the Wild Horses or, UFO and stuff like that. So I would use a double pedal, and my main kits are DW. I've got sort of like a collector series, I think it is, which is my main, kit. And then I've got another one. I sound like I've got loads of drums. Well, I actually have. But those are my main kits. And I got a Tama kit, a double bass drum kit. And that's really my main rock kit. If I was doing sort of like real hard rock, I'd probably use that Tama Star Classic. Double bass drums, lots of tom-toms, and is a great rock kit. The DW can do anything kind of thing. I've got two. I've got a cheaper one, which I can't remember the name of, which is quite handy to have. And I've got a 20-inch bass drum with that. I've got a 22 and a 20, so it's double bass drums. So if it's a smaller gig with some friends, I can take the 20 bass drum, and I can mount toms on like the bass drum too. So it just cuts down on size and room.
So you vary the setup depending on who you're playing with, what the music is, and where you are, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Clive, I mean, the number of people that you've played with, it's incredible over the years. And I was going to ask you, can you tell us about some of those experiences? But I think you probably haven't got time to talk about all of them. But are there any particular experiences that you've had over the last sort of 30 or so years that stick out, and you particularly, you remember them, whether, you enjoyed them and it meant something to you? Are there any there that you could share with listeners?
Yeah, there are so many. Everybody I've worked with has made an impression on me. They've all been real characters, and they've all had their own thing, which is great. From Pat Travers, Uli Roth, Screaming Lord Sutch, you name it, Brian Robertson, Jimmy Bain, John Cale, absolutely genius. And if I had to pick out, a band and people, it would be Pete Way and Phil Mogg. Working with them was such a laugh. You would not believe it. Great players, but the pair of them together were like Morecambe and Wise.
Well, they really, yeah.
Pete, is a one-off, and Phil is a one-off. I mean, there were times when it got a bit crazy, especially with Pete. It would be like you'd turn up at the studio for recording, and the glass doors, there was a guy there, from like the glass place, putting new glass in like the doors, and it's like, well, have you been broken into? They said, no, it was Pete. He'd left his trainers behind, and he came back and forgot there was a door.
Oh,
and just walked through, lots and lots of stuff like that. So, I couldn't pick out one, but those two were just so funny. And there were times when my stomach would hurt because I was laughing so much,
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
How do you find the difference between recording live and performing live? Recording and performing live?
Well, there's a big difference in what you play and how you play, because a live gig is a performance. So you can overplay to a certain extent. You can do stuff. Whereas when you're recording, you've got to live with this, this tune for the rest of your life. So, and quite often, because it's a recording, people aren't in the moment when they listen to it. They're sitting at home and they put the vinyl on, or they put the headphones on, they do what they do. So you kind of ease it back from what you would do live, and then add stuff when you've heard the playbacks and you hear how it's going. Go, well, actually, I can put that back in there. But, you tend to cut it right down to like a basic version. And then as you do takes, either remove even more, because the most important thing is getting the groove. You're playing the song. You're not playing for you.
No.
You're not getting your chops out. If there's a space where you can, great. But that's the most important thing. Play to the song. And I would imagine that sort of, it's a very similar thing to acting. You do a stage, you've got to overact, you've got to ham it up, because you've got to project yourself to all those people in like a hall. On camera, it's cut it right back, do very little. Otherwise, you look like a ham actor on film. And the same thing for music. Pare it back, simplify it, and then evaluate it and see where you can put it in.
If you had to choose one to do, what would it be?
It'd probably be live.
I thought you might say that.
Yeah, because of the excitement, the fun, the meeting the people and everything else. Although studio work is a very close second,
Yes,
but
of
it
course.
is much more, especially nowadays. And this is the thing, from pandemic, so much stuff now, it's like working from home. You know, you do stuff separately and you
Yeah.
get sent a track and it's like put drums to this and you send it off, somebody will put guitar on that, then they put the vocals. Unfortunately, I seem to have form on being able to play the virtually bugger all. So I don't hear the song until it's finished. And I go,
Right.
well, God, if I'd have known that that was the melody for the vocal and that was going to happen there and all this,
Yeah.
I would have played it slightly different
Oh,
there.
right. So you would record it, but you wouldn't necessarily know what the vocal was going to sound like or anything like
No,
that.
mine, but like I say, but I've got form on this because a lot of the UFO stuff was done like that. Because
Yeah.
Phil would not have, and he does this a lot. He has a finished track, and then he puts the words to it, and like the vocals. There's a great story actually with Pete Way, with George Martin, when they were out in Montserrat, I think, doing an album, and George Martin called Pete into his office, which was on the beach, and you could look out, and there's the sea, and there's all the people, and he's going, "Now, Pete, I'm very, very worried because Phil doesn't seem to have the words for a lot of these songs, and we're working on them, and we're getting to the point where we need to, He said, but I'm probably worrying, and he's probably in his hotel room now, writing the lyrics to these songs. And as he said that, Pete looked over his shoulder out to sea and saw Phil water skiing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've got form on this.
Yeah.
And another little funny was with Pete. We're working on this song. We're working on a lot of songs, and what Phil will do, he will keep singing the same words, different melody, but these lines would be in lots of songs. And there was a line which was on one of those nights, which is "She Tripped Across the Floor." Well, he was using it in about 5 songs, and we were rehearsing away. And Pete said, "Here, Phil," he said, "Yeah." He said, "She and I've tripping across that floor a lot tonight." I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I mean about the fun of
The
working.
Morecambe and Wise, it sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Clive, what projects are you working on at the moment?
Well, I'm working on Backstreet Crawler, first album in 40 years.
I was going to say, this was the Paul Kossoff band from Free, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. Well, he formed that band with Terry Slessor. And then they got session players in, and they did the first album, and then actually the session players then joined the band, but the band started with Paul and Slessor
Yeah.
living in a house in Reading, and they wrote all that stuff, and Rabbit joined, stuff like that. So yeah, so it's been a long time. I mean, it's how do you sort of pick up where Paul had left off? I mean, he's such a great loss to music, and at such a young age, he didn't even get to the 27 club. He was 25.
Oh, that's too young, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but we got stuff. We got songs written by Rabbit. We got Rabbit playing on stuff. We've got fantastic musicians involved. My cousin Rhino is playing on some of the stuff. We've got Terry Wilson, the American bass player, who did the sessions and then joined the band on it. And then we've got a queue of guitar players. We've got John Buckton, who is fantastic and plays very much in that style of Paul, and gives it the spirit. But we've got a long list of people putting their hand up saying, "Please, please, can I?" I won't mention names, but.
No.
But
So that album's coming out in 2023.
It will do at some point. I mean, it's same thing. Everybody's all over the place and trying to, nobody can get in one room, but it's gradually coming along. There's some great stuff has been put down, and lots of influences in there. But it's great to be working on something that's not the same old kind of thing. There's a lot of different feels because different people have written stuff. I mean, Rabbit writes in a certain way. He's a fantastic writer as well as a fantastic keyboard player.
Yeah.
We got Mark Taylor, who has done Simple Minds and Elton John, and who, everybody on keys and doing a lot of the writing. Sless, of course, with his fabulous voice and style. So there's that. I'm working with Ray with the Frankie Miller Full House.
Yeah.
Haven't played on like the album, but the album comes out next year. So, but going forward, I'll probably record as well. But I've done the shows. I've done some live shows with them, and they've been fantastically well.
That's with the Frankie Miller Full House.
Yeah,
Who are former members of Frankie's band, I guess.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew Frankie and worked with him a little bit back in the day. So,
Did you?
yeah.
Yeah. So on the Backstreet, I'm quite interested in on the Backstreet Crawler thing because I didn't buy any of their albums, but I was very much aware of them at the time because of Paul Kossoff.
Yeah.
So is it still? I know you said it's not the same old, but has it still got that Backstreet Crawler vibe?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But, Backstreet Crawler wasn't the same old.
No.
You know what I mean? It was that. And the comments that I've had, which have been fantastic, on people who've been listening to it saying, it sounds old-fashioned, but it sounds new. It sounds current. But it hasn't got that, it's got the best of the old-fashioned sound from the 70s with this new kind of vibe to it. And there is one track, I mean, it's a very basic mix. It's not actually finished, the track, but a friend of mine did a fantastic video for it called Rome in a Day, which is on YouTube. And you can get an idea, of what to expect. But there are different kinds of styles because of different people involved, but it's not the same old AOR or the same old heavy metal or the same old this, which is great, it's just nice to have something that's different and sounds like now.
And that's available on YouTube, is it?
It should be. They might have taken it down because it's not a finished mix. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff to be. It was like a rough monitor mix. Yeah. You can't hear the backing vocals so well. This might be loud, or the drum sound hasn't been fully mixed, but it still sounds cracking.
I was going to suggest we put it on the show notes for anybody that would be interested in listening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it's just taking time to get stuff because none of us are all. In the old days, they'd ship you off to some place in Wales where you couldn't escape. No. And you'd have to write the album, and then they'd ship you off to Cornwall where you had to record it, and you'd do it all. You'd have the arguments and the fights and like the drinks. In fact, I was talking to Phil Mogg about this yesterday, and because he's doing some stuff, and I sent him some stuff to listen to, and he's going, and I said, it's all done. I put drums to a keyboard. In fact, one of the tracks I put drums to an acoustic guitar. Now, how do you know where the song's going to go? And he says, I've got some stuff. He says, but I don't like doing it like that. I like all the arguments, the fights and the drinking. And I said, not us.
All the egos.
Yeah, all the egos, The whole thing kind of, morphs into this thing that's bigger than just one person in like a room.
But you look back and you must really enjoy those times as well.
Oh, yeah. But I try not to look back too much, to be honest, if at all, because... I'm very much, what's next? What can I do? That's what's exciting. Not looking back going, oh, that was great. Yeah, fine. Yeah. What's next?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the contemporary music scene, Clive?
It's pretty healthy in lots of ways. My only worry is because the money's not coming in from the revenue. I mean, okay, bands in the 70s and the 80s probably made vast sums and it was, well over the top. But nowadays with streaming and Spotify and stuff like this, it's very hard to make money.
I was reading the other day about the amount that an artist earns, and you can't even call it a penny, but per listen on Spotify, it's sort of like 0.00001p or something.
Somebody has obviously worked out wrongly that, okay, if I buy a record, I will listen to it 300,000 times in my life. Yes. So to buy it and download it's £1. So if I divide it by 300,000, that's what I play for one listen. Well, that's wrong. That's totally wrong. Even if you love a song, you may not play it more than 4 times a year, And basically that money's not going into the business. It's not going into the next generation. It's not, it's just being taken and used by corporations,
Yeah, yeah,
and they don't fund bands anymore. They
yeah.
don't do anything. Years ago, record labels, at least they would give you the money to go and record and do this, and money to go on tour, and money for this and money for that. So they actually did something to kind of warrant them making a load of money as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think the value seems to have gone, doesn't it? And I remember
Yeah,
as a kid, and you probably do as well. You go and buy an album, probably £2.25 or something, which relatively was a couple of weeks paper round money, and
easily.
you would sort of you'd listen to it and you thought,
Yeah.
I like the single, I like that single, and then
Mm.
there were one or two tracks that you didn't you thought, all right, and then you got into them, and because you bought it and it was you spent money on it.
You had
You
to
made
listen.
yourself listen to it, and you got into it.
Yeah.
Whereas now you
Yeah.
put Spotify on, you think, that's all right, I'll go to the next one, and you never ever go back to that track that you could have got into.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think you lose out a bit.
Absolutely. And you've got the entire collection of music in the world for
Yes.
just £5 a month.
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't really bear thinking about. And I think basically they've got to regulate it like they do with media. They do it with radio, they do it with television, they do it with all this, and there is a certain value to be put on it. But if it's streamed, it's kind of out there in the ether, and they get away with doing anything they want. Whereas if you play a record on the radio, you have to pay this much money. You know, they need to, governments, they're not really fussed about it. It doesn't matter to them. But if it was any other industry, there'd be uproar. That
there
how
would
can you
be.
possibly take this, like product, like from a farmer, and give them nothing
Yeah,
effectively,
yeah. It's sad. Well, hopefully things will change, and
Yeah, you never know.
I guess, well, I hope so. Things have a sort of habit of going around in cycles, don't they? So hopefully
do.
The musicians will sort of suddenly stand up and think, well, actually, I need some value. I've spent a lot of time on this, 10,000 hours learning the drums or the guitar. I need
Yeah,
to.
exactly. And you're never going to get that back nowadays.
No,
Whereas
no.
years ago you could,
Yeah,
and but it won't be musicians standing up. They don't really have much of a track record, and there's too many. What you need is governments
yes,
and people in business to turn around and say, look, this is wrong. I want to get into a business where I can take a product and pay 0.0003 of a penny,
yeah,
and give it to somebody who pays me this much, because they're all making a fortune. And
yeah.
basically, people are not paying enough for that music.
No, they're not. No, I agree totally. I mentioned earlier on about the cost of an album in the 70s, £2.25. That
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
looked at it now, that would probably be 60 quid or something. So
Yeah. Well, it's half of what they pay a month for having the entire world collection
yeah, yeah.
at their fingertips.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's got to change. Or, music's not investing back into it to itself,
No,
back
no.
into talent. Yeah.
On a positive note, and we've probably covered it there, what advice would you give someone who was thinking of entering the music industry? If you've got any listeners that are younger listeners perhaps, or even
Yeah.
slightly older listeners who play an instrument, they're in bands, and they really would like to make it their career, what sort of advice would you give on that, Clive?
Well, the main thing, be prepared for knocks. You've got to be a bit thick-skinned on this, and you've got to be fairly focused. You've got to really want to do it, and that's it. If you fall at the first hurdle, you're not going to do it. But if you do manage to keep going, and you're building a career, I think you have to. One of the most important things for me is do what you believe in. Do what you believe is right. Don't try and chase somebody else. Oh, we want you to make a record that sounds like these guys. You find that stuff done like that dates really fast, and you won't be proud of it. But if you try and do stuff that your heart says, yeah, I really like this, I really want to do this, then it's got a good chance of standing the test of time because you put yourself into it. If it's just me trying to sound like so and so, then it's not gonna stand. So follow your heart and be prepared to put up with a lot of grief.
Sounds like great advice. So where can people find out more about your work, Clive?
Well, there's Facebook, I put stuff on Facebook.
Yep.
There are the various websites for Backstreet Crawler, Frankie Miller's Full House. Wikipedia seems to know a fair bit of what I get up to somehow. But I don't have a personal web page. But you can search, like I say, Wikipedia's got a bit of info. Backstreet Crawler, House of X was a project I did with Lawrence and Rocky, all from those Schenker era and UFO era. There's information on there.
Lawrence Archer.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So the House of X, but that hasn't been updated because it's been a fairly, sort of dormant project because this is another big, Lionheart, of course.
Yeah.
This is the big issue. Everybody's having to work in far more bands. In the old days, you could be in one band and earn a living. If you're in one band, unless it's doing incredibly well, you're skint. You've got to be working. So it's all about give and take. Oh, I'm going to be away for 6 months here. Please don't do anything. It's like, oh, my God. Yeah. So you either have to get a dep in or whatever. So, yeah, the business has changed an enormous amount.
What we'll do is put all those links on the show notes so people can have a look at their leisure. And it's been really good talking to you, Clive. Thanks ever so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thank you for asking. And onwards and Edwards, as me and my cousin say.
Onwards and Edwards. That's a great way to conclude the show. Thanks ever so much for coming on.
Okay. All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.